There are dreams that visit you like old friends, familiar and warm. Then there are dreams that hunt you through the corridors of sleep, carrying messages written in a language your waking mind refuses to remember. Mine belonged to the second kind. For 37 years, she came to me draped in blue silk that moved like water, standing in a temple that existed nowhere on any map I'd ever seen. Her eyes held the weight of centuries, dark as monsoon clouds, and they followed me through every corridor of that impossible sanctuary. She never spoke, never moved beyond that slow, hypnotic sway of fabric around her form. But her presence filled every corner of my sleeping world with a longing I couldn't name, a recognition that felt older than my own bones. I was 7 when she first appeared, a child living in Kedarnath, high in the Himalayas, where the air tastes of snow and ancient prayers. My grandmother would find me some mornings, tears dried on my cheeks, speaking of the blue lady who watched me from inside the mountain. She'd press her weathered palm against my forehead and whisper old mantras, but nothing could keep the dreams away. Some souls, she told me once, her voice barely audible above the wind that perpetually swept through our village, carry debts from lifetimes they've forgotten. The universe never forgets, Beta. It only waits. I grew up carrying those words like stones in my pockets, heavy and smooth from constant turning. The dreams continued, night after night, year after year. Always the same temple with its impossible geometry, pillars that spiraled upward into darkness, and floors that reflected not my image, but something else entirely. A man I didn't recognize, wearing robes I'd never owned, standing in places I'd never been. The woman in blue would extend her hand toward me, and I would reach back, our fingers always stopping just short of touching. In that moment of near contact, the dream would shatter like glass, and I'd wake with the taste of jasmine and copper in my mouth. By the time I turned 18, I'd learned to navigate these nocturnal encounters with the skill of a practiced lucid dreamer. I could control certain elements, the direction I walked, the questions I asked the silent air, the way I approached her ethereal form. But I could never change the essential nature of our interaction. She remained untouchable, a mystery wrapped in silk and starlight. I left Kedarnath for Delhi, then Mumbai, chasing education and career opportunities that my village couldn't provide. I became an architect, designing buildings that reached toward the sky but never quite touched it. My colleagues knew me as Arjun Sen, a competent professional with an unusual talent for creating spaces that felt somehow sacred, somehow familiar. But the dreams followed me to every city, every apartment, every hotel room. The blue goddess became my most constant companion, more reliable than friends, more persistent than lovers. Women would come and go from my life, but she remained, patient and eternal, waiting in that temple that grew more detailed with each visit. The strange incidents began in my 30s. Small things at first, shopkeepers calling me by the wrong name, their faces puzzled when I corrected them. "But you look like a Samaran," they'd insist, and I'd feel a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Old men on trains would nod at me with recognition as if we'd shared conversations I couldn't remember. Children in marketplaces would point and whisper to their mothers about the man who forgot. I started keeping a journal, documenting these encounters. The pattern that emerged unsettled me. The name Samaran appeared with increasing frequency, always spoken by people who claimed they'd never seen me before but somehow knew me intimately. I researched the name. It meant wind in Sanskrit, a title associated with ancient guardians and keepers of sacred knowledge. The dreams intensified. The temple gained new rooms, corridors that led to chambers filled with manuscripts I couldn't read, and statues that watched my passage with stone eyes that felt alive. One night, in a dream so vivid it felt more real than my waking life, she led me to a wall covered in script that looked like flowing water frozen into meaning. As I stared at the inscriptions, understanding flooded through me like recognition. The symbol spoke of a guardian named Samiran, who had hidden something precious, something that could reshape the boundaries between dream and reality. I woke that morning with tears on my face and a certainty that had been building for months, finally crystallizing into decision. It was time to return home. Kedarnath had changed in the 20 years since I'd left. The roads were better, the tourist infrastructure more developed, but the essential spirit of the place remained unchanged. The mountains still held their ancient vigil, and the air still carried whispers of prayers spoken by countless pilgrims over countless centuries. My grandmother's house stood empty, its windows like closed eyes. She'd passed 5 years earlier while I was trapped in a corporate meeting discussing profit margins while she breathed her last breath. The guilt of that absence had never left me, and now it mixed with the strange anticipation that seemed to electrify the very air around me. I rented a small room in the village center and began walking the paths of my childhood. Everything felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, as if I were seeing my past through someone else's memories. The temple where my grandmother used to take me for morning prayers looked different, smaller somehow, and yet more significant. It was there, on my third morning back, that I saw her. She stood beside the ancient stone steps, not the ethereal figure from my dreams, but a flesh-and-blood woman wrapped in a blue sari that caught the mountain light like captured sky. Her hair fell in dark waves over her shoulders, and when she turned to look at me, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Those eyes, the same eyes that had watched me from the Temple of Dreams for 30 years. "Samiran," she said, and her voice carried the sound of temple bells and distant thunder. "You finally returned." "My name is Arjun," I wanted to say, but the words died in my throat. She approached me with the same slow, purposeful grace I'd witnessed in countless dreams, and when she was close enough that I could smell jasmine and something else, like ancient parchment and ceremonial smoke, she smiled. "You don't remember me," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I dream about you," I managed to whisper, "every night for 30 years. Her smile deepened, carrying both sadness and something that might have been relief. "Dreams are just memories wearing different clothes. I am Nilakshi. We have work to finish." She took my hand, and the moment our skin touched, the world exploded into fragments of sensation and memory. I saw flashes of myself in robes I'd never worn, standing in chambers I'd never entered, speaking words and languages I'd never learned. I saw her face through centuries of different contexts, sometimes as a queen, sometimes as a priestess, sometimes as something even more mysterious.
Most clearly, I saw the two of us standing before an ornate chest in a cave that pulsed with its own internal light. My hands, but not my hands, different somehow, belonging to someone I used to be, were placing something inside that chest, something that gleamed like captured starlight and hummed with power that made the very air vibrate. "A promise," she was saying in that vision memory, her voice echoing strangely. "When the time comes, when the worlds grow thin, you will remember. You will return." The vision shattered, and I found myself standing in the present-day temple courtyard, Nilakshi's hand still clasping mine, her eyes searching my face for signs of recognition. "The dreams were calling you home," she said softly. "Everything that has happened, the wrong names, the strange encounters, the way reality has been bending around you, it's because the promise is ready to be fulfilled." I wanted to demand explanations, to insist on logic and reason and all the comfortable structures of the rational world I'd built around myself. Instead, I heard myself asking, what did I promise? To guard something that doesn't belong in any single lifetime, to keep it safe until the boundaries between worlds grow thin enough for it to be needed. She released my hand, and I immediately felt the loss of that connection like a physical ache. The time has come, Samiran. The barriers are weakening. Over the following days, Nalakshi became my guide into a version of reality I'd never suspected existed. She showed me how the village itself was layered with meanings invisible to casual observation. Certain stones in certain walls contained symbols that matched the inscriptions from my dreams. Shop owners and farmers would nod to her with a deference that spoke of knowledge passed down through generations. "Your grandmother knew," Nalakshi told me, as we walked paths that seemed to lead deeper into the mountains than geography should have allowed. The dreams changed now that we'd met in the waking world. Instead of the temple, I found myself in landscapes that felt like memories of memories, vast libraries with books that rewrote themselves as I watched, gardens where flowers bloomed and withered in moments, cities that existed in the spaces between heartbeats. In these new dreams, Nalakshi spoke to me freely. She told me about the nature of the thing we'd hidden together in some previous existence, describing it as a key that could unlock doorways between parallel possibilities. She spoke of guardians who lived multiple lives to protect such objects, forgetting their true purpose in each incarnation until the time came for remembering. "But why me?" I asked in one particularly vivid dream as we stood together in a garden where the flowers were made of light. "Because you chose this," she replied, touching my face with fingers that felt like moonlight. "Before you were Arjun, before you were Samiran, before you wore any name at all, you understood what it would cost and chose anyway." The cost, she explained, was always the same for guardians like us. To remember fully would mean releasing our grip on the current identity, allowing the lifetime of Arjun Sen to dissolve back into the larger truth of what we really were. Most guardians, when faced with this choice, chose to remain in their current forms, their missions failing as the objects they were meant to protect faded back into myth. "What happens if I remember?" I asked in one particularly vivid dream as we stood together in a garden where the flowers were made of light. "You fulfill the promise. The key finds its lock. Reality shifts in ways that most people will never notice, but that will prevent a catastrophe they'll never know they avoided." Her dream face grew sad. But Arjun Sen disappears. His memories, his attachments, his carefully constructed identity, all of it becomes just another story the wind tells. I woke from that dream with a terror I'd never experienced. Not just the fear of death, but the fear of never having existed at all. Everything I thought of as myself, my career, my relationships, my hard-won understanding of who I was, all of it might be nothing more than an elaborate disguise worn by something else entirely. For 3 days, I avoided Nalakshi, staying in my rented room and trying to convince myself that everything I'd experienced was an elaborate delusion. But the dreams wouldn't stop, and each night they grew more insistent. The blue goddess was gone, replaced with visions of disasters that felt prophetic rather than imaginary. I saw cities swallowed by darkness, oceans turning to vapor, skies that cracked like eggshells to reveal the void beyond. On the 4th morning, I found Nalakshi waiting outside my door. "The time is almost gone," she said without preamble. "You can feel it, can't you? The way the air itself seems to be holding its breath." I could. The entire village felt poised on the edge of something, like that moment before an earthquake when all the animals go silent and the very ground seems to listen for some signal only it can hear. "Show me," I said. She led me higher into the mountains than I'd ever climbed, up paths that seemed to exist only when we were walking on them. The air grew thin and strange, carrying scents of places that never existed and sounds of languages that predated human speech. After hours of climbing, we reached a cave entrance that looked like a mouth opening into the mountain's secret heart. Inside, the cave pulsed with its own bioluminescent light, and I recognized it immediately from my vision memories. This was where we had hidden the key, whatever it was, however long ago. The chamber opened into a space that defied the mountain's external dimensions, its walls covered with the same flowing script I'd seen in my dreams. At the center of the chamber sat an ornate chest, exactly as I remembered it, humming with contained power that made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. "You can leave now," Nilakshi said, her voice echoing strangely in the space. "Walk away, return to Delhi, live your life as Arjun Sen. In a few months, maybe a year, the dreams will stop entirely. You'll forget all this. You'll be free." I approached the chest, and with each step, memories that weren't mine flooded through my consciousness. I saw myself as Samiran, a guardian trained from childhood to protect objects of power. I felt the weight of responsibility for maintaining the barriers between worlds, keeping chaos from spilling through cracks in reality's foundation. I saw the moment when this particular key was created, forged from the intersection of possibilities and designed to lock away something that should never be released. I remembered the ceremony where I'd taken the oath to guard it, knowing even then that success would mean the eventual dissolution of whatever identity I wore. Most clearly, I remembered choosing this burden out of love, not romantic love, but the fierce protective love one feels for existence itself, for the delicate web of causality that allows consciousness to emerge from chaos. "What happens if I don't remember?" I asked, my hand hovering over the chest's intricate lock. Nilakshi's reflection in the chest's polished surface showed her true form, not quite human, older than the mountains, beautiful in a way that hurt to perceive directly. "The barriers fail. Reality fragments. Not today, perhaps not even in your lifetime, but inevitably, and all the lives that could have been saved, all the beauty that could have been preserved, gone." I thought about my life in the cities, the buildings I'd designed, the small mark I'd made on the world as Arjun Sen. It felt suddenly insubstantial, like a story told by someone else about someone who'd never quite existed. Against that, I weighed the vast responsibility of guardianship, the sacrifice of individual identity for collective preservation. The choice, when it came, felt like falling backward into an ocean of light. I opened the chest. Inside lay something that my eyes refused to properly see, simultaneously a crystal and a flower and a geometric form that existed in more dimensions than human perception could process. The moment I touched it, every barrier between who I was and who I had been dissolved like salt in water. I remembered everything, every lifetime, every identity, every moment of choice that had led to this cave. I was Samiran and Arjun and a dozen other names worn like costumes across centuries of guardianship. I understood the true nature of the key, its purpose, and exactly how to use it. The activation required nothing dramatic, just a touch, a whispered word in a language that predated human speech, and a willingness to let go of the illusion of separation between guardian and guarded. Reality rippled. Somewhere in the quantum foam that underlies all existence, a potential catastrophe collapsed into impossibility. The barriers between worlds strengthened, and the delicate balance that allows consciousness to flourish in an ocean of chaos was preserved for another cycle of centuries. But Arjun Sen was gone. I woke in my rented room 3 days later with no memory of how I'd gotten there. The owner found me unconscious on the mountainside, she explained, and had brought me back to recover. I felt different, lighter somehow, as if I'd been carrying a weight I'd forgotten about until it was lifted. The dreams had stopped completely. For the first time in 30 years, my sleep was peaceful and empty. I should have been relieved, but instead I felt a strange sense of loss, as if I'd forgotten something important but couldn't quite remember what.
I stayed in the village for another week, walking familiar paths that now felt subtly different. The old-timers still nodded at me with recognition, but when I asked about the name Samiran, they looked confused, as if they'd never heard it before. There was no sign of Nilakshi. When I asked about a woman in blue who'd been staying in the village, no one knew who I meant.
The temple where I'd first seen her stood exactly as it always had, ancient and serene, giving no hint of the impossible encounter that had changed everything. On my last morning in Kedarnath, I climbed partway up the mountain one final time. I found a cave that looked familiar, but when I explored it, there was nothing inside except stone and shadow. No chest, no inscriptions, no pulsing light, just an empty chamber that felt like the echo of something that might have happened in a dream. I returned to Mumbai and resumed my life as Arjun Sen, architect and occasional dreamer. My work took on new qualities. The buildings I'd designed seemed to possess an unusual sense of balance, as if they were positioned to strengthen rather than strain the fabric of their surroundings. Colleagues commented on my evolved aesthetic, the way my structures seemed to resonate with some deeper harmony. Sometimes, in the space between sleep and waking, I catch glimpses of blue silk disappearing around corners of memory. Sometimes I taste jasmine and ancient smoke, or hear the echo of temple bells that ring in no earthly sanctuary. These moments pass quickly, leaving only a sense of gratitude for something I can't quite name. The village writes to me occasionally, postcards and letters describing changes both subtle and profound. The mountain streams run clearer now. Children report dreams of flying rather than falling. Old conflicts between families seem to resolve themselves with unexpected grace. Most intriguingly, several residents have written about a new feeling in the air, as if the valley itself has become more stable, more real somehow. As if the very ground has remembered something it had forgotten and now rests more securely in its place between earth and sky. I keep these letters in a box beside my bed, next to a journal I don't remember starting. The journal contains descriptions of dreams I don't recall having, visions of temples and goddesses, and promises made in languages I've never learned. The handwriting is mine, but the memories feel like they belong to someone else. Perhaps they do. Perhaps we are all composites of selves we've forgotten, carrying forward missions we've inherited from people we used to be. Perhaps identity itself is just another story we tell to make sense of the deeper currents that flow through consciousness like underground rivers. What I know for certain is this. Somewhere in the Himalayas, in a village that tastes of snow and ancient prayers, the barriers between worlds stand strong. Reality remains intact. Consciousness continues to flower in the garden of existence, and somewhere beyond the reach of ordinary memory, a promise has been kept. The blue goddess visits other dreamers now, calling new guardians to their purpose. I won't remember their faces when they arrive, won't recognize the names they'll leave behind when they embrace their true calling. But sometimes, on quiet mornings, when the light hits my apartment windows just right, I feel a deep satisfaction whose source I cannot trace. The work continues, the web of protection holds, and in the space where dreams meet waking, love remains the force that guards existence from its own infinite fragility. The mountains endure, patient and eternal, keeping their secrets safe.